So, welcome, Dr.
Thank you.
Alexander.
Thank you.
We will hear you.
Let's get started. I will briefly touch this subject. Unfortunately, radiation or radiation protection is not a hype as DCB, which it actually should be. This talk should be in the main hall, and the main hall talks on DCB should be here. Nonetheless, I hope I hope that that I can create some awareness amongst everybody present here, and especially I hope that you will take the message that we give you here back to your institutions and work with it. I may point you out, and it's only because, can I send a beam to it? No, but please look at this. Not that it's important, but it explains the next slides. First of all, these are my disclosures. I'm speaking of fees for ACNEST. So if you remember, PharmD, PhD, I did a PharmD and a PhD in pharmacology. And when you look in pharmacology, oh, perfect. When you speak about pharmacology, like non-interventional cardiologists, we all know what the RAS is, don't we? The RAS is for renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. And why am I bringing this subject now? Because normally when you give a talk, the conclusions at the end, nobody is interested anymore. So therefore, the wrap-up is in the start. But for us, like interventional cardiologists, RAS means something else. This is the actual acronym that you should remember. The R for radiation, awareness, ALARA, and shielding. So if I get this message spread, this is the only thing you will remember, I'm more than happy. So we will talk about radiation, awareness, ALARA, and shielding. And if that succeeds, we have great success. So, to me, radiation is kind of a paradox. And although this is not the CTO meeting, I would like to share a CTO case. This is a post-Cabbage reverse cart through a vein graft on the LAD. Of course, bilateral. What you can actually see is that there is no MAC on, there is no panning, there is only floor sturo, and the frame rate is 7.5. So in the end, now you will see the procedure itself. We go retro, you see a microcatheter, we make a knuckle, we knuckle up, we go from antegrade, we dissect, we make a knuckle down, we balloon the base of operations, and then, of course, we do a guideline and facilitated re-entry, and this is the end result. So normally a CTO procedure takes a little while, but having these measures in place, it only took us 1.3 Gray. I think this is something that is quite astonishing. Radiation, it's all about radiation. Radiation is not good for us, radiation is not good for the patient, but we need it to cure the patient. So that's the actual paradox. So for me, myself, I'm not a radiologist. I had to go back into physics. What does radiation do? Well, actually, radiation has enough energy to pop out an electron from an atom, and therefore it's dangerous. So you have different kinds of radiation. You have the alpha, beta, gamma, and neutron rays, and the X-ray is actually gamma rays. And they tend to go through paper, to people, through thin aluminium, but not through lead. And therefore, we wear lead in the cath lab. Here are some entities which I always quarrel with. Are we talking about Grays or Sievert or millisievert, Air, Kerma, DAP? Those radiologists, they throw all these terms at us, but we don't understand. But in all honesty, it's quite simple. You have a dose, which is in gray. If you weigh the types of radiation, then you will get the sieverts. The effective dose is actually the equivalent dose through tissue, and that is the dose that you receive in sievert. So that's actually what we're talking about, the sieverts that you absorb. And then you have these things like the DAP, which is very important to depict or to show how much radiation actually has been given. This picture is particularly of interest. This is one day after the blow-up of the Fukushima neutral plant. And what you see here on the y-axis is radiation per hour at different locations in Fukushima during one day. So the actual amount of radiology or actual amount of radiation that was spilled was 50 to 70 microsievert, which is quite a lot, we think. But now imagine this, when you are one day in your Cath lab, you will get this amount. You will age quickly, yeah. So this is an increase of 2.5 to 4 times compared to one day at Fukushima. So this is important. This is really important. This makes us aware of how much radiation we actually are exposed to as interventionists. Not only one day, but for 20 years probably. And does that radiation harm us every time with every bit? And actually it does. This is the non-threshold model, which actually says that every increment in radiation can cause harm. So there is no lower limit. No, the lower limit is minus, I would say. There is no lower limit. And hence, it's surprisingly that when we look at regulations, that they are fine for us with 20 millisievert, whereas they know none or 1/100th of a millisievert will already hurt us. So these are the limits. And then imagine for the patients, there is no limit, of course. It needs to be justified, but can you imagine at how many sievert a patient will be exposed? The problem with radiation, of course, are the health risks. If you have like ionizing radiation, you can actually harm like cells, DNA, and tissues. So you will have different health problems. And they mainly constitute about cataracts. If we compare this, there's a 6-time increase in cataract for interventional cardiologists compared to the general population. Oh. Can you please get that out of the screen? It's fine, the new software, but... Or shall I do it myself? Hello? Maybe I can do it?
You can just cancel.
Yeah, I can do it. Okay, fine. Cancer, 3 times the risk. Cardiovascular, atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease, 2 times the risk. But mainly what people are always talking about is the orthopedic insult that you will get. Spine injury. This is a survey done like 15 years or 10 years ago, but also very recently. And you see that in 35% of the interventional doctors, they were complaining about back complaints, neck complaints, leg complaints. So that's massive. 1 in 3 actually has complaints about the lead they wear because of the radiation that they receive and want to protect from. And look at this. This is a survey. This is a lifetime attributable risk for all cancers by low users of radiation and me being the CTO operator. And what you see is the incidence of cancer, males, females, and mortality. And there is a striking 4% incidence of cancer. That means 1 in 25 of my colleagues will get cancer. And for mortality, it's even worse. 1 in 50 will die because of cancer. And we all know the brain tumors. So this is very, very serious condition. So my goal of today is creating awareness. And I hope I already did. I don't know if you guys all know this person. This is Homer. Homer is not the smartest man alive, as you can witness from his brain. But even Homer knows that in radiology, there are specific no-brainers. Things we can do to diminish our radiation exposure. So that's called ALARA. I think everybody will know. It's time, distance, and shielding. And actually it stands for as low as reasonably achievable. I sometimes annoy my boss by saying, we don't do ALARA, we do AHARA, which means as high as reasonably achievable, because they don't listen to what we have to say about radiation protection. So if we take into account some hygiene measurements, even without additional protection devices, we can be quite low on the exposure ladder. So, for instance, the position of the patient, very important. What you can see is if you have the intensifier high, you will get a high dose. If it's low, low dose. If the tube is next to the patient, high dose. If it's higher, at 60, 80 centimeters, low dose. So the position of the patient actually means you can influence the amount of radiation, and especially the scatter radiation that you as an operator will receive. Something else is the distance. I think we all know this. If you stand away twice the distance, you will have 1/4 of the dose. If you stand away 3 times the distance, you will have only 1/9 of the dose. So it's better to back off. Although everybody wants to see what's going on the table, it's better to back off. Another thing, angulation. We all like the spider view. Oh, it's like on the left side, and you can see from down, man, nice images. But radiation actually is very, very high. It's better to have it on the right side and not with the steep angulations that you might like. You can do with less steep angles, and that will diminish radiation also. So very simple rules just for yourself to protect yourself and the patient. The next thing is the magnification. And our older colleagues we've been trained by tend to have like the mag massively on. And then even they did a cine and they were like this. You could hear the tube. All kinds of radiation. It was really, really high. But if you take a less distance, your dose will diminish. And please store fluoro everything. You don't need to cine everything. This will also keep the levels down dramatically. So these are very simple things which you can do. Also, when you're talking about filters, if you filter your tube with different materials, you will be able to wash out the low energies, and you will keep the high energies, which are necessary to keep the projection, so to speak, acceptable. So you can filter out radiation that will not contribute to your image. Collimation, another thing, very well known. If you collimate, you will have less radiation exposure. And these are all measures that we know. Besides that, you can adjust the settings on your tube. For instance, select the low dose options available on all tubes now. Or this is the intensifier. You can have a hard beam or a less hard beam. So please put it on less hard beam. When there is an obese patient, fine. You need to do it, put it higher. But the default setting should be as low as reasonable achievable. So hygiene, actually, this covers it all. If you have far distance, low frame rate, angulated, you will get less angulated, and on the right, you will have the least radiation exposure. Whereas if you have like a Mac on, 30 frames, left-sided, steep angulations, the radiation is massively. So ALARA, and I have to go back to my own field of interest, the CTO. This is a very recent published paper by Dr. Werner. You may or may not know him, but he looked at radiation doses over the last 10 years. And with the application or implementation of ALARA. And what you will see here is that the JCTO score, that means the difficulty of the procedure, hence fluoro time, it's an indirect measure, was the same in the years, but if you look at the dose, you can see that the dose nearly diminished. And actually, you may remember the 1.3 that I showed you from the beginning. Well, that's me. So implementing these very efficient, simple measures will already reduce radiation dramatically. And then, actually, what we are here for, shielding. What is the normal shielding that people have in the lab? Well, most of them have like this removable shield. They have like an apron, and they have a skirt. And they do matter, and they do reduce. But it's not only that you have them, it's how you use them. If you don't pull your screen in the right position, there's leakage. If you don't pull up the skirt in the same way, there's leakage. If you wear your apron on the wrong manner, you will have leakage. And you have to remember that lead is not a shield, it's just a filter. If you have like the commonly used 0.5, there is still 4% leakage under the apron. So, but when you think, I'm going back to 25, you will have 20% of the dose that would normally hit your body would still hit you. So I understand that people want lead less, I can understand, but if you picture this, you might want to have the normal size. So best practice at this day is actually combined in this figure. You have the shields that I said, the apron that I had, you have the thyroid protection, lead glasses. I'm not a huge fan, but yeah, it adds massively. It's like 95% of reduction to your eyes. I don't know how much people do it, but I don't, in all honesty. And the cap I don't have either. But these are considered best practices these days. So what can we do more? Well, we can have like the next gen of radiation protection devices. In my mind, there are actually 3 now available. I think the Protego is more in the US. You have the Rampart and you have the Agnes. The Protego is like, you can see it is a movable shield, and you have skirts, and you have like this cockpit phenomenon. So it's like you're in the interstellar space shuttle that covers whole territory and protects you from radiation. Then you have the Rampart, which is actually a screen which you can see through, and you can move it, and you could position the shielding next to the patient. Takes a bit of time. And then you have the Agnest, which is actually a modular system with multiple protection shields that are placed all along the patient on both sides, also the head, and I will come to that later a little bit, with a skirt that can cover the whole table, so on both sides as well. So protection, well, I think is max. Is there any evidence? Because these things, they cost a lot. My administrator was not so happy when he heard about what the price was. So there is something that we have to prove. And therefore, I'm thankful that people actually took an effort to create some evidence. And the evidence actually is astonishing. So first of all, this was done with the Protego device, and it was published like 2 years ago, and it compared whether the shield versus the Protego in terms of radiation dose exposed to. The operators, this was for the operator only, he had like a dosimeter on his waist and on his thyroid. And what they did was they compared exposure on those positions in lead versus the Protego system. And you see a dramatically reduction. Must be around 90–95%. So this was actually the first proof that these devices actually reduced massively the radiation. Then there was also a comparison of the Protego system to see whether the team will be protected against radiation. You remember the Protego from the first picture. So what they did was they monitored the nurse, the scrub nurse, the echographer, the first operator, etc., etc. And again, they compared whether the dose was lower in the Protego group versus the standard shielding. And this was also observational, 25 in both groups, mostly diagnostics. And again, if you look at it, the primary operator, scrub, circling nurse, if you look at the level of the head, there is a huge decline of dose exposed to when you compare the Protego versus the standard. And that also goes for the waist level. Here you see actually an increase, which is rather strange. You see an increase in radiation with the Protego. And this can be done or can be explained by the fact that at the waist level, you have to mount the system or the device very well. If you don't do it, there's a leakage. And this probably explains the higher dosage that these patients or these operators got. Another one, comprehensive shielding for structural heart. So this was all coronary, but structural heart. So the workflow is a bit different. And does it work as well in structural heart? Again, I'm going to show you the next graph. Looks like the same, eh? You see at the waist and the thyroid, and you see a dramatic decrease of radiation when the protection device was used. So also here, for these patients, for structural and TAVR, the protection device by Protego appeared to be effective. Then this one, this is the Rampart. So also this device been investigated, and it's versus standard lead. And I have to say, so these people in the Rampart groups were without lead, and the others were with lead. And also here, at different sites, there were dosimeters. It was a randomized controlled trial, and what they actually saw that the reduction was dramatically, also above 90%. And then there is the last study that I want to discuss is the study in which the Rampart was compared with the ACT system. And this was recently published by Riley. And this is taking into account all these positions. And I think therefore the ACT is the most advanced shielding system, because if you are in a cath lab and you are here, fine. The protection devices that I just discussed are shielding here and here. But these people are being less exposed to shielding. And that is what you actually can see in the dosages that those different positions took. Green is Rampart. I think green is ACT, blue is Rampart, and yellow is standard. So what you see is that those who were in this position actually were diminished quite a lot, but the positions here were most shielded by the ACT system. And that is simply because it's mounted around the patient. Again, this is what we just discussed, and also the angulation matters. Also, the angulation is best being protected by the ACT system. So what is the ACT Protect? This is the ACT Protect. You have an integrated shielding which is on top of your cath lab table. There is a CPR board above it, which is very handy. So you don't need to get away or get rid of all the protection devices if a patient comes into a resuscitation crisis. You can just fold all these modular shields away, and you can still act very well at the patient level. Then you have all the skirts surrounding the whole table, and in the mattress there's also some shielding. So the patient itself is also being protected by this device, which is something the other devices don't have. And of course, you must believe them, which I normally do not. So I took my own lab, and we compared also the standard way of working with the same operators, with and without the X system, and we also had like a 90% reduction of radiation that was caught by our badges. So I think the systems do work, but it does not work always. If you don't pay attention how you put your shield, if you don't pay attention where the shield is, where the tube is, etc., it might not work. So as we do in interventional cardiology, oh sorry, this one I forgot. This is again about the positions around the table. In the X system, everybody is protected, and in the other systems not. And for me especially, the workflow, it's not here, yeah, the workflow is so easy. The patient getting on the table and off the table, it's just clicking away the shields and you can move on. So for me, that's very, very efficient. But those devices only work like if you see what you do. And I'm not an imaging doctor. I am, I think, the least IVUS user within interventional cardiology. Although you cannot ignore what IVUS tells you, you cannot argue with IVUS, but especially with this. These are actual live feed monitors that you can place at your screen, which will represent all the ones that are around the table with their personal dosimeter. So if you are standing and you operate and you see it once, so this is lifetime of life, so you see yourself going red, then you are aware, I need to do something. And you can adjust whatever, either your position, the tube, or whatever. But the imaging option with the live feed will actually help to get the system, well, actually do what it's supposed to do and get you 0 to minimum radiation. So I hope that is it. The conclusion is the same actually as the wrap-up. Radiation awareness, ALARA, and shielding, they are all important, but I like to add the imaging as part of the routine as well. Thank you.